Hi, my name is Amber Harris. I'm the Housing Innovation Manager for York Community Service Association and the local health officer for the town of York. I want to welcome you to our third housing seminar in this hour-long webinar. We hope that you're going to learn about the landlord incentives available to you through those folks that rent to housing choice voucher participants through the Maine State Housing Authority. This housing seminar is brought to you by a joint grant that was received through Maine Housing by York Community Service Association and Fair Tide of Kittery. We have the Executive Director, Emily Flinkstrom, joining us. There she is. The Housing Navigator Pilot Program is a 2-year project established by the legislature through LD 1733. The navigators for this program work with families experiencing or at risk of homelessness and obtaining housing and assisting them in maintaining sustainable housing following lease up. The 3 major components of the Housing Navigator Pilot Program are landlord engagement, pre-tenancy assistance to families, and housing stability services. And to make sure we're helping you as best we can, when you register for these webinars, we collect your questions and we get them to the speakers so that they can answer them during the content period, or I can follow up with you later on. I want to also let you know that I offer 1-hour consultations with folks for free to discuss the potential to create rental units on their properties, whether that is through new construction, renovation, retrofitting. But we have consultations available through your Community Service Association's website. You can go on our calendar and schedule a time to talk with me about your property and the potential to create a rental unit and potentially have a tenant that would allow you to have some of these landlord incentives that we're going to discuss. These webinars are all recorded and they will be on the public access channel for the town of York, as well as on YCSA's Housing Solutions Library. At this point, I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have 3 women who are very well versed in landlord incentives in the state of Maine and in New England. We're going to start with Barbara Brann. She is a housing manager with Maine Housing and the Maine State Housing Authority. She is also an HCV inspection services specialist there at Maine Housing. Then we will move to Emily Flinkstrom, who is the Executive Director since 2016 of Fair Tide and Kittery. And lastly, we will go to Kara Rodenhizer, Director of Home for All Coalition. I think we'll start with Barbara and discuss a little bit about the housing program and how folks in the Housing Choice Voucher Program get access to those vouchers and how that program works and how you might fit into that program as a potential landlord in the future. I will hand it over to Barbara. Thank you for joining us, Barbara.
You're welcome, Amber. Thank you for inviting me. I've worked in the housing world for my total career of 42 years. So hopefully some of the information that we get to share today will be helpful to you. Maine Housing has tried to engage our landlords in the last 5 to 6 years with some landlord incentives. What we have found in the past is lots of times with our initial inspections for our Housing Choice Voucher Program, when we get to the inspection, there are items that make the unit fail the inspection. Some of the bigger ticket items like egress windows, electrical, plumbing, the landlords weren't always willing to make the repairs. And especially in a really tight housing market, which we have right now, you know, they can rent their units to somebody on the open market most of the time for even more than what, you know, the Housing Choice Voucher Program is allowed to pay the landlord. And so they would walk away from the inspection, leaving the tenant without housing. So we came up with what we call the landlord repair program. It is only for failed items on an initial inspection where we help the landlord pay for those repairs. So there is a $250 deduction or buy-in that the landlord has to pay, but then we will pay the remaining amount up to $5,000 per calendar year. So what the landlord does, we give them the list of repairs, they make the repairs, we go back out, we pass the inspection, and then they submit their receipts to us and we reimburse them for the repairs that they have made. This program has been a huge success since its beginning. We have allocated between $100,000 and $150,000 a year to this program, and every year we have met and a couple of years gone beyond what we had set aside for the landlord repair program. We also give landlords the opportunity, so as I said, it's a $5,000 cap per calendar year. So if a landlord had two separate units that they came in, so the first unit, the repairs were only, say, $2,000. And then they had another initial inspection with a different tenant at a different location. And so they could access the program again. They would have that $3,000 remaining. So we have had some landlords that have in the same calendar year actually accessed these funds more than once. We've had an overwhelming response back from landlords, how helpful it is. And so we continue to offer this program even today. So then we got into, COVID and having to try to think outside the box again of how we could get landlords to participate with us. And so we offer a $750 sign-on bonus for landlords that are willing to work with the Housing Choice Voucher Program and lease a tenant with this program. So when the unit passes inspection and we are ready to pay the landlord, their first housing assistance payment, we also include that $750 incentive as well. So has it made a huge increase? I'm gonna say it probably hasn't hurt, but $750 today, it's a little, but it's not a whole lot, but it still is, an incentive to some landlords, especially those that we have a lot of housing units with, it does add up quickly. So we instituted that incentive 3 or 4 years ago. So the third incentive that we have is we had landlords saying that they had a lot of damages when tenants were leaving their units. And what was Maine Housing gonna do about that? And so we also took some of this same money and we came up with the damage repair program. So if they have a housing choice voucher tenant that moves out and leaves damage, we tried to make this as simple as possible for them. We had them take pictures of the damage once we knew the tenant was out of the unit, and then to also send us some receipts of the repairs for the damage that was above and beyond normal wear and tear. And so it is $1,500 per unit. There's not a cap on this one, per calendar year. So a landlord could have several units that we would pay them the $1,500. The one thing I will say, it's a great incentive. The one thing we have heard back from landlords, and I totally agree with this, $1,500 is nothing to sneeze at, but a lot of what we have gotten, just by looking at the pictures of what the landlords send in, it's way beyond $1,500 in damage. But it is, an incentive. It has been utilized a lot by our landlords. And so, that's the third incentive that we have. We have at Maine Housing given every local housing authority funds for them to have these same 3 incentive programs at their local housing authorities. Because Maine State Housing covers the jurisdiction of the state where there's not a local housing authority. And so to try not to be in competition with local housing authorities, we gave them some money that we had so that they could offer their landlords the same incentives that we do as well. And that money has been used every year since we have offered that.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate that rundown. I know we've had a lot of interest from folks with regards to, we have a potential unit. What do we do if we want to rent to you? And one of the enticements that has come up has been, do you have any money for retrofitting space, particularly those spaces that may not have been used because now they're working online, whether it's office space or an area above a garage or attic, basement, things like that. And so renovating, repairs are a big one, as well as the sign up is a big one. And like you said, they do add up once you have multiple units with a landlord. Any of these things certainly can add up. And I appreciate that information. And I'm wondering if you've heard much about either a referral bonus or anything about energy retrofits, or anybody asking about those kind of things. And those are kind of questions that I've been asked about. Whoa, would this cover and for a potential landlord? And right now I'm working with a local group to try to make that connection between the landlord and say Efficiency Maine or something like that. But as landlords are doing upgrades to their units to rent to us, it's come up that people are saying, oh, could we make this more energy efficient? What can we do? And so I know one of the questions that we've been asked is, are there groups or entities that are working on this? And I think, and you can probably answer this, is what is the scope as far as that initial repair program? Like, is it just you have a window that you need to upgrade, or you want to upgrade it to the nicest window that's available, if we were going to be specific on that one?
Yeah, great question, Amber. So it is not, and we've had landlords ask this question. So it has to be an item that fails during the inspection. So say we go and we do the inspection and there's something wrong with the furnace. It needed a cleaning tag, or it needed some work done on it. The landlord will say, well, can I just, buy a whole new heating system? No, it's not for those types of upgrades. The $5,000 probably would cover that anyway, but it's not to make, like upgrades, it's to fix the repair. So if we have an undersized window, it's to, install a window that then meets egress. Now, if the landlord buys a more expensive window versus a cheaper window, that's not for us to make a decision on, but it's not to actually come in and build, new rooms or upgrade all the appliances. It has to be to make the repairs to those items that failed during the inspection. It's a great question too about, energy efficiency. I do know there's Efficiency Maine. I also know here in our Energy and Housing Services Department at Maine Housing, there's also the heat pump program that, working with the governor's office and money, that she allocated, the governor allocated to install heat pumps. And so that, they could get a hold of our Energy and Housing Services department, or also go on our website, and there would be information about that program there as well.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that extra information. And at the end here, we'll be sharing everyone's contact information and how to reach out for maybe that program through your website too. Thank you so much, Barbara.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next, we're going to move to Emily Flinkstrom, the Executive Director of Fairtide, talk a little bit about the landlord incentives that she's been offering and that have been successful in our area. Welcome, Emily.
Amber, thank you so much for having me on this webinar and allowing us to share some information about our landlord program. So Fairtide, for those of you that aren't aware of our agency, we provide housing and supportive services to individuals and families experiencing homelessness in the Seacoast area. And our agency has been around for about 20 years. We've really been growing intentionally over the last 7 years or so. And one aspect of our growth has been to work on bringing more units of affordable housing to the area through new development. And so we own 6 units in Kittery, and we have another 2 projects in our development pipeline right now, and our intention is to continue that forward momentum because we really, as many of you are probably aware, have a extreme housing shortage in our area, and so we're working on bringing more deeply affordable housing to our area. But that takes a while, and so as we were thinking about how we can have an impact now, we started looking more into landlord partnerships and how we can grow that aspect of our work and how we can build deeper relationships with landlords and provide them some incentive and some reason to partner with us. And so after doing a lot of research on programs that exist across the country, we established our Landlord Engagement Initiative in late 2019. And so we launched that as a pilot program. And it was pretty successful. It's kind of slow going, but has been experiencing growth over the last several years. And part of that growth is thanks in part to this Housing Navigator pilot program that Amber mentioned in the beginning, that really allowed us to bring Amber on board. And part of her job is to reach out to landlords and help educate them about these types of programs. So this webinar is a result of that. And the other piece of Fairtide's program is that, our focus is on helping individuals and families experiencing homelessness and those who have housing vouchers get connected with our landlord partners. And in Maine, here in Maine, we're actually fortunate to have a few different types of vouchers that we're able to tap into for the households that we work with. So Barbara's information that she shared is specific to the vouchers that are administered through Maine Housing. Here at Fairtide, we are able to tap into some other vouchers that may not be eligible for the incentives through Maine Housing. So our program at Fairtide really complements the one at Maine Housing, so that we make sure that all our landlord partners, no matter what the voucher is that the household has, are able to get some incentives to work with us. So we have been continuously improving the program as we go along and really listening to the feedback that we're getting from landlords. And so we very, very recently updated our incentive program and our structure, which I think for the better, based on some of the conversations we've been having with landlords. So our incentives, we offer up to $2,000 in incentive payments that are paid out before or at lease signing. So the way that our process is going to work from now on is that when a new landlord decides to, or an existing landlord enrolls a new unit in our program, they get $250. So as long as the unit is going to be available within the next 4 months, when they enroll that unit in our program and say they're going to work with us, we pay the $250. The next benchmark will be when that unit is actually ready to rent, because sometimes a landlord will enroll a unit, but it's not quite at the point of being ready, or there's a tenant in there at the moment. And so when that unit is ready to rent and when they would normally be expecting to have, a lease start and payment to them begin, they get another $1,000. So once that unit is ready, they get the second payment of $1,000. And then the third payment of $750 is paid out to the landlord when the lease is signed. So the only caveat there is that if a lease does not end up being signed with one of our partners, those 2 initial payments, we do expect them to be returned, but we don't anticipate that being an issue because we have lots of demand for these units. And so the way that we work is we bring forth potential tenants to the landlord partner, and they can do their own vetting process and decide who they would like to rent to out of the folks that we bring forward through our program. So so that's, again, a new structure, but it really allows the landlord to get those incentive payments at the time when they're expecting payment anyway, if they were to just rent on the open market. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't asking a landlord to hold a unit for us while we work on getting somebody in there, and then not get them payment until down the road. So that was the intention of having those more upfront payments. The other piece that we offer as an incentive is similar to what Barbara mentioned that Maine Housing offers through their damage repair program. We offer up to $2,000 in a risk mitigation fund, which is very similar. We do include in that the opportunity to file a claim if there happens to be an eviction that needs to happen or there's lost rent. So that is also included in addition to if there are any damages that need to be repaired that are above and beyond a security deposit. I will say in our experience and in the research that we did when we first created our program is that a lot of times that fund is used more as a reassurance. It's really a way for especially new landlords to feel like, okay, at least I know that's there if something were to happen. But again, in our experience, we have not had to tap into that fund very often. We also just added a referral bonus, and Amber had mentioned that. So we do offer $250 for when a landlord refers another landlord to our program. Once that new landlord enrolls a unit, that $250 we paid out to the individual that referred them. And then finally, and I think this is a really important piece, we provide case management supportive services in an ongoing fashion for all the tenants that we help house. And so that's really a key piece of, Fairtide has been doing that for 25 years. Our model of housing and supportive services has really been successful. And so we find that that's really the way that the households will remain stably housed and that any issues are really nipped in the bud. And the case manager also serves as a resource for the landlord. So again, it provides that reassurance that a landlord knows if anything comes up or if there's anything they have questions about related to this particular tenant, they have somebody that they can reach out to and contact and ask questions for and get support. Also, they have the support of the program staff, so myself and Amber. So there's really kind of a whole team behind this effort, which I think is sort of unique for our program. So we're finalizing all our documents right now for these new incentives, but I encourage anybody to reach out to me at any point if they have questions. We have housed about 16 or so households through this program. And again, I'm hoping that will continue to grow steadily as we get the word out a little bit more about what we're offering. It is a tough market, as Barbara mentioned. It's a really tough market, and there is a cap to the amount that vouchers can pay a landlord. It's based on the rents in the area, but we're just seeing that rents are increasing at such a steady rate still that oftentimes they can't keep up. So that's another reason for these incentives that we're offering, is to try to make up that difference. But we think this is a really unique way for property owners, for landlords to really participate in the solutions to this housing crisis that's impacting all our communities and that impacts all of us. And so we think that engaging property owners in this way provides an opportunity to do something good for your community, to really make a life-changing difference in the lives of the households that we work with, and just to play a role in making our communities all stronger. So I'll end there. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you, Emily. That was really informative. And as you mentioned, yeah, that support with the case management is crucial with any of these projects that we're doing. We're not just connecting a landlord with a tenant or a tenant with a landlord. We're providing that service of support with everything that they need, not just the landlord, but not just the tenant, both sides. And whether it be social workers, whether it be assistance with other paperwork, whether it be calling to facilitate inspections, there's a host of services that we provide to make this as easy as possible for both parties. And I wanted to note two things. You've had a really high success rate with this, with your housing folks for over a year. And if you wanted to mention that. And then also, I know that Kittery has, and I know this is a little bit off, but Kittery does have a new program that gives some incentive to folks who create ADUs to house folks in the HCV program. I don't know if you could hit on that just briefly.
Well, it's not related to the voucher program, but yes, Kittery.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm part of the Kittery Housing Committee, and we launched a program a couple of years ago that provides grants up to $50,000 for property owners to build an ADU. They have to then rent that ADU to a household that is at 80% or less of the area median income. the household that is getting the grant also has to meet that income threshold. So they need to be making 80% of the median income or less. We're still in the pilot phase of that. So we've given out the first 2 grants, and we're hopefully going to be getting some more funding to expand that. But that, yes, and we are also working on some zoning changes so that it's easier for folks to build ADUs on their properties. And that's a great way to build a rental unit where you can then partner with one of our agencies and get those incentives to rent to somebody that has a voucher.
Thank you. Yes, I misspoke. It was to Kittery's residents who meet a certain threshold. But ADUs is definitely a hot topic. We've talked about it before in our webinars. Our next webinar in September that I'll talk about at the end here will be about leveraging those zoning changes to create those units. So folks are listening and interested in learning about how to create rental units. ADUs is certainly a topic you're going to be hearing more about, and there are opportunities in our communities right now to create those and to get some support, both whether it be from the town or one of the entities that we're talking about here as a landlord renting to someone in a situation that really could use that that assistance, meeting an affordable threshold, and alleviating maybe another bed somewhere else that's needed. Thank you, Emily, for that information. We're going to jump now to Cara. I think she's on, and she is going to be speaking a little bit about her work with Seacoast United Way. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Cara Rodenhizer, the Director of Housing Initiatives at Granite United Way, and in that role, I lead the Home for All Coalition, which is a coalition now of about 50 or so or more members that range from various sectors, homeless service providers, community members, educators, welfare directors, really a broad membership that are all working together to address the issue of homelessness and access to affordable housing in the greater Seacoast. Home for All currently serves Rockingham, Stratford, and southeastern York County, Maine. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our affordable housing incentive program and can pull up some slides that I have for you all to share. Let's see if it will let me do it this time. If not, I can do it without the slides. All right, let me pull my slides up. Okay, so our affordable housing incentive program was really created to bring together key stakeholders on the Seacoast, that being landlords and social service providers, with the intent of helping move individuals out of homelessness and to be able to remain stably housed. Currently, so the Affordable Housing Incentive Program was originally created through the Home for All Coalition. And when it was created with this intent, it was largely to come up with an innovative solution to addressing the shelter bottleneck that many of Home for All's member agencies identified, where folks were in shelters, taking up beds, ready to move into housing, but were really struggling with finding a landlord to accept a voucher or to rent to somebody who had experienced a period of homelessness. Now Home for All has really grown legs and gone beyond the Seacoast and is currently serving Rockingham, Stratford, Belknap, Merrimack County. And when our funding allows, we're able to administer our program in southeastern York County. But as we're looking at how to address the shelter bottleneck, as Emily had mentioned when she was speaking, we all definitely are in support of the development of additional affordable housing units, but we know that that is a much longer game. And so we really needed to have an immediate solution. So AHIP primarily focuses on how can we increase affordability within the housing that we have, and how can we better partner with landlords to not only remove barriers, but also be adaptable to adapt our program to address emergent needs or barriers that landlords are facing. So while our program is now currently in its 3rd iteration of funding, we've made changes along the way in order to be sure that we're adaptive to the needs of the landlords that we're working with, but also to bring new landlords into our program. And some of the ways that we partner with landlords is to help by offering a comprehensive slate of incentives for them that allow them to make the numbers work on their end, remove barriers that they might face in accepting rental assistance or vouchers. But we also want to help the agencies that we work with because they're another critical piece of this puzzle. So we do work with partner agencies to provide services after somebody is in housing. We recognize that providing somebody with housing alone is not enough, and that having that support in place prior to housing placement, but also in that first year of tenancy, is really a way to set the tenant up for success and also mitigate many of the concerns landlords have voiced. And so when you look at it from a broader level, the Affordable Housing Incentive Program is really about aligning mutual efforts to create maximum impact. We recognize that Home for All by itself cannot solve the issue of homelessness or housing, but if we can align all of our members' efforts together, if we can align the needs of the tenants and social service providers, we have a much greater chance at maximizing our impact. And so AHIP really is about a partnership that's rooted in a mutual vision. And that is to strengthen our communities to ensure that everyone has a place to call home, because we feel strongly that home is really a foundation for health, both in terms of our community's health and being a thriving community, but also for the individuals that we're trying to work with. And the nice thing about AHIP is housing and homelessness are these large, complex social issues, but it does give you an entry point for all of the stakeholders. And we do our best to make sure that all the stakeholders, whether it's a landlord, social service provider, or tenant, have what they need to be successful. To give you an idea of our impact, last year, we received funding from the Community Development Finance Authority in New Hampshire and partnered with 17 different shelter and referral agencies who were able to refer individuals looking for housing to units that were enrolled in our program. And from these referrals, we were able to move over 110 individuals out of homelessness and into permanent housing on the Seacoast. And we did this by partnering with 8 New Hampshire landlords that were able to enroll 57 units altogether into our program. And 8 of our partner agencies worked with households prior to housing placement and during that first year of tenancy to help them remain housed. And so far, we've had about a 91% success rate for 2022 in terms of those that have reached 12 months of being leased up are still in housing. Our program was initially piloted prior to receiving this funding in the height of the pandemic in 2020. And that retention rate is about 92%. And many of those individuals are now in their 3rd year of housing through our program, which is much due to the partnerships that we have with agencies around this program. And so often I'm asked, well, what is the impact of adding 57 affordable housing units on the Seacoast? And when you look at the impact it has both for our partners and our communities, it's quite significant. So these 57 units allowed us to free 65 shelter beds. And these are emergency shelter beds that are intended for somebody who has no other form of shelter. So it's really important that when somebody is seeking shelter, there are beds available. So that was able to free up a significant number of beds. We were also able to move 5 individuals out of places that were not meant for habituation. So places like cars, a park bench, that inevitably these 5 individuals could be occupying shelter beds, but often are not able to enter a shelter because shelters are at or above capacity. We were also able to divert 40 individuals out of unstable housing situations, so couch surfing. And this number to me is one of the most significant numbers, because while we only collect data on the individuals that we are housing through our program, we know that this number is actually quite larger. We have a good portion of individuals that are served through our program that became homeless because they were somebody that was allowing somebody else to sleep on a sofa or double up in their housing that wasn't on their lease, and then they lost their housing. So this number is likely quite larger. And this is important because, again, that would feed into the beds that we were able to free up through our program. And then lastly, with one of our incentives to landlords, we were able to make repairs and renovations to 37 units that allowed them to be what we call voucher ready. And that's important because many of our partner housing authorities, often on the seacoast where many folks want to live and be, and the rents are much higher, struggle to find landlords to accept vouchers, and thus that impacts the housing authority's voucher utilization. So this allowed us to add 37 units that weren't participating in the Housing Choice Voucher Program into the voucher program, and also ensured that the housing that we're providing is dignified living environments. So that's, again, a pretty significant impact. When we talk about who we serve, many folks say, well, you're serving people transitioning out of homelessness. And it's really so much more than that. We're serving people that might be your friends, your neighbors, the person serving you your coffee, your children's teachers. So our program really is not for a specific population. We really serve everyone. So we work with aging adults who may no longer be able to afford the housing they had because of their fixed income as they've aged, have become homeless, and need to find more affordable housing. We serve veterans, families, youth transitioning out of foster care, survivors of domestic violence, you name it, we really are inclusive of all. And the work that we do, we cannot do without our partner agencies. So this gives you an idea of some of the agencies that we partner with throughout New Hampshire and in Maine. And these are the agencies here that you see that are providing services or referring households to our program before and after. But what you don't see are many of the welfare directors or housing authorities that we work with in a different capacity, where the welfare directors do often refer folks to our program. They aren't able to provide services following. And we work with all of the housing authorities that issue vouchers in the regions that we serve. And again, I cannot say enough, the work that these agencies do beforehand to ensure that tenants are what we call rent ready, meaning they understand the terms of their lease. They know that the housing is within their means. They know what it means to be a good neighbor. They know who to go to when there are need for repairs or maintenance. They're really doing great work. And then post-housing placement, sometimes it's not even about how to help somebody stay housed, but really they go above and beyond to make sure that the family, not just the head of household, is connected to what they need in their community. So it really is intended to be permanent housing and a permanent place for their family to live and thrive. And looking at what we provide our landlords, this iteration of our funding is allowing for us to provide 3 incentives. This year, our first 2 incentives are sign-on bonus and eviction prevention payment are from support with the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. So those incentives are limited right now only in New Hampshire. But we did receive funding from the TD Charitable Foundation that gives us more flexibility on where we can utilize that, since Southern Maine is in the region that the Charitable Foundation operates in. So our sign-on bonus this year, and this has changed in terms of what we call it and the amount, largely due to our funding source. But this year, we're able to provide a one-time per unit sign-on bonus that's equivalent to 1 month's rent. And it's all the landlords in our program are eligible to receive this. So this amount will vary based on the unit size. So if you have a 4-bedroom unit, the sign-on bonus would be more than a 1-bedroom unit. We also offer what we call an eviction prevention payment. This replaced what we used to have, which was called a 30-day holdover or vacancy incentive that typically would offset lost rental income or a period of vacancy due to repairs, renovations, a tenant leaving the unit, things like that, or needing more time to transition into the unit. Now our funding is not allowing us to pay that. So we got creative and are able to pay landlords what is called an eviction prevention payment. This ranges from $1,500 to $1,800, depending on where the unit is located. But at the $1,500 starting point, it amounts to about $125 per month. And what we do with this payment is we pay it up front, and landlords opt into receiving this. And with this payment, they will receive kind of a monthly newsletter that shares important resources, upcoming training opportunities that are really geared toward housing providers and helping them better understand and navigate needs households face and some of the barriers to housing stability. None of their participation is mandatory, but since we've administered the program in 2020, we've found that a lot of our partner landlords reach out, not about concerns with the tenants that are housed through our program, but the tenants that are not. And they want to help their tenants, but they don't know where to go. They don't know what the resources are. So this has often been helpful for them to have just come to them before they need it, so that when they do need it, they know where to go. We also share information as we approach winter months and things like that with utility assistance, so that landlords can proactively share this with their tenants versus tenants reaching out when they're already far behind on their utilities. And then lastly, our most popular incentive that we are actively looking to grow is our grant repair program. And this year, it's largely geared toward housing choice voucher units. So we really want to partner with our housing authority providers and all the regions we serve to help them with their utilization and get more landlords enrolled into the program. This offers grants up to $3,700 per unit for any unit that fails a voucher inspection, or units that require some type of minor repair or renovation to make it move-in ready. So these funds are flexible, and in the past, we've utilized it for a unit that perhaps there were damages when somebody was vacating the unit, or in a follow-up housing inspection, the unit fails. We can be fairly flexible with how we utilize this, but the intent of these funds is to really ensure that everyone we're housing through our program can be housed with dignity. We do have some eligibility requirements for our units. We ask that rents don't exceed fair market rent. So typically we go by New Hampshire Housing's payment standards, or whatever the issuing housing authority payment standards are, whichever is higher. It's an affordable housing incentive program, so we really strive to make sure that it is in line with voucher payment standards in whatever region it's in. We require that they pass or meet the criteria for HUD quality standards. And that landlords are willing to accept vouchers and other forms of permanent rental assistance. And at a minimum, it's a 12-month lease. As I had mentioned, we do provide support to our agency partners who will provide services through the duration of the lease. And so we have a lot of support built in for our agency partners. And this year we have some additional tenant support. So we do pay tenants security deposits and up to 3 months of arrearages for tenants that are either housed through our program, or tenants that are working with any of our partner agencies where they can refer for that assistance. We also allow our partnered landlords to refer households behind on rent that are not housed through our program to this assistance. That funding is really a one-time funding that's available. So when the funds run out, the funds are gone forever. But that is something that is additional that we are offering this year outside of our program. And real quick, to give you an idea of what the process is, we try to make it very simple for the landlord, where a landlord will enroll a unit by just filling out some information in the survey. We share that with our partner agencies. They identify prospective tenants and we connect them to the landlord. Landlords will go through their tenant selection process. We don't have any say over that. We just ask that landlords select a tenant from our pool of partner agencies. Then at that point, a housing inspection is completed, the lease is executed. And once there's a signed lease, we're able to pay out all of our incentives. And the landlord, if they are seeking support for any repairs, will send us proof of the repairs. Typically that's an invoice, and then some type of documentation initially is provided to just justify that, yes, this is a legitimate expenditure. And I'm not sure in terms of timing, if I have time to share the video, but I'm happy to share that if timing works.
Go for it.
Okay, all right. So we do have a video that was done with one of our current landlords. And I can't say enough in terms of the landlords that we've partnered with, and we really look forward to expanding our pool of landlords. Currently, we have a group of landlords, property managers, and a few developers who are really striving to help us grow our program and address the issue of homelessness on the Seacoast. So I'll let you hear from one of our landlords, Ben, who has been involved with our program since 2020.
Important that everyone realizes how big of an issue homelessness is along the Seacoast. Everyone thinks that the Rockingham, Stratford areas are very affluent, but there's a lot of people in our community that are having financial hardships. Rents are going up so fast, and we need to set aside some affordable units for people that need it the most.
While the development of additional housing units is critical to addressing homelessness and housing instability, it's often a long process that can be very costly on the front end with no guarantee that a project comes to fruition. AHIP is unique in that it allows us to capitalize on our existing housing stock and increase affordability through partnerships with local landlords in the communities that we serve.
I got involved with AHIP because I was looking for a way to provide low-income housing along the Seacoast. I was having a really hard time meeting my quota of giving 20% of my portfolio back to low-income.
Our program comes with a support network. Landlords have a single point of contact to walk them through the process from tenant selection to lease up through the entire first year of tenancy and beyond. We also provide support in the form of housing stability supportive services that are not only helpful for the tenants housed through our program, but also can be beneficial to landlords for tenants outside of our program as well.
It has been so helpful to have the case management aspect. I don't know the tenants like the case managers do, and they've made it easy when we do have hiccups along the way to support them and give them what they need to be successful.
Landlords have access to incentives such as a per unit sign-on bonus. They also have access to funding to hold a unit to offset a period of vacancy if somebody needs more time transitioning, or if the housing inspection process is taking longer. And lastly, landlords have access to funding to help make repairs or renovations to their units to not only ensure that their unit is up to standard, but also to ensure that everyone that we house through the Affordable Housing Incentive Program is housed with dignity.
One of the great incentives of AHIP is the grant repair funds. It allows you to renovate the unit as if you were to go to market, and it offsets some of those costs. So if you have to put $10,000 into a unit, typically, you're not going to be able to charge affordable housing and make your money back. By offsetting some of that, you can give the same product as you were to market rents, but charge affordable housing rents.
While we have a wonderful pool of landlords that we are currently working with, we need more landlord partners to join us in the Affordable Housing Incentive Program and consider enrolling units. We'd like to continue to grow that network to ensure that when housing is in need, we have options that can be provided.
If it weren't for AHIP, I know I wouldn't be able to provide the amount of affordable housing I am. Being able to have an agency like AHIP walk you through that and get you to the finish line has been amazing.
All right. And as I mentioned, and as Ben mentioned, we're always looking to grow our landlord partnerships, and more information can be found on Granite United Way's website under AHIP or our Affordable Housing Incentive Program tab. My contact information is up here, but I'm sure will also be shared. So if there's ever any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Cara. I really appreciate that focus on how those units, just one unit alone, frees up so much space at the shelter and other beds. It's such a ripple effect. Each one of these units that we're creating, whether it is a large scale development with multiple units or a single ADU, does ultimately alleviate some of the need, whether it's a shelter or someone's couch or people sleeping in a tent or in a car. Also, I appreciated that you spoke about who the HCV participants are. I think in New England, a lot of times homelessness is an invisible topic, and it's going to be more and more visible, and unfortunately, and in rural Maine and southern Maine, it is very isolated, and we're working very hard to get those folks connected through social services. And I want to thank all of our speakers today. You've been very innovative in how you've come up with some solutions to entice landlords, which is really what we need to be doing, is having more conversation with folks who have spaces that can potentially be retrofitted. And share this with your friends and your family and your colleagues. We'll be doing our best to spread this webinar as well, to get more landlords incentivized to share and hopefully alleviate some of the beds that we need so desperately to fill. Thank you all so much, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you. Take care.